It's been a few days, but we're back, and I just want to start off by covering some breaking news that's coming out of the 2024 election, which is about Governor Ron DeSantis dropping out of the presidential campaign. This really caught a lot of people by surprise, and I'll admit it caught me by a surprise too, because really nobody saw this coming as quick as it did or as suddenly as we expected it to come. Unlike the other campaigns that we've seen end, Ron DeSantis was really confident about making it through a little further because he was all cementing his path forward in South Carolina, and he was talking about how he has this bright path ahead, how he thinks he can make something work in Nikki Haley's home state after winning second place in Iowa, where he had that kind of impressive finish. But I guess ultimately things did not work out for him, and he is no longer in the running. And if you want to listen to my honest thoughts about Ron DeSantis's campaign, you can listen to my podcast episode. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or you can go to theishannesshow.com to listen to that episode. I get really brutally honest about what my views are on Ron DeSantis and the way he's run this campaign. Of course, the way these things go and the way politics goes, Ron DeSantis decided to drop out essentially 3 minutes after I posted my episode. So if you do listen to it, it might sound out of date. It's not actually out of date. It's just I happened to post it 3 minutes before Ron DeSantis dropped out. So yeah, if you want to go listen to that after this video, go ahead, because I think it would be a nice addition and a nice, partner to this video. But I just wanted to cover that real quick because it seems like the way this was going, DeSantis either ran out of money or he did not see a path forward for himself. Usually it's when money runs dry, because you can lie you can lie for a really long time, but the moment you run out of money, you cannot continue to lie. So I think, and when I say lie, I mean lying to his supporters about his path forward, because we've established more than enough times that there's no path forward for him. He did not have a path going in to the rest of this election. So I would just say that it's surprising. Apparently, DeSantis had been talking about this for a few days. He went home to Florida after the Iowa caucuses, and after going home following the Iowa caucuses, he decided on Thursday is when he started talking about seriously dropping out of the campaign. And over the weekend, he spent some time talking to his wife, talking to his advisors, including his only congressional endorsees. And together, I think they came to that decision this morning. And DeSantis made the decision apparently on his own. Reportedly, he said on his own that he's going to drop out of the race. So he decided that it's done. And I said game over is going to happen at some point. DeSantis was not going to be the nominee. And anyway, that brings me into what this race is, which is that it is now a race between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. And this race that now stands is basically about the Donald Trump versus the alternative race. This is the race that Nikki Haley has been asking for a really, really long time. It's been a long time coming. I think she is very happy by the news of DeSantis dropping out. I think it works out really good for her in the end that this is happening. But I would just argue that maybe this isn't the right thing for her. Definitely not, because we're going into the New Hampshire primary soon. So going into the New Hampshire primary, we have Donald Trump and Nikki Haley up there. I don't say neck and neck. I don't say, going at it, but they're going somewhere. They're both performing the best that they have ever been able to do. I mean, Trump may not be doing as good as he once was doing back in April of last year, but Nikki Haley is definitely doing her best, and she has shot up in New Hampshire, and she's at 36.1%, but Trump is at 49.8%. And it's because of polls that have been coming out and lately that show, I know I made that video about how Nikki Haley is surging. Of course, as I love to say, very conveniently, after I make a video, it decides to become outdated. So, some news came out that the polls were beginning to show Donald Trump taking a double-digit lead over Nikki Haley. And consistently, if we're looking at where these candidates lie, Trump is at that 50% mark, around that 50% mark. Nikki Haley is at that 35-ish to 40% mark. 44 is a bit of an outlier, I would say. 46 to 44, but that is American Research Group, and they're good at these polls. They have a really good standing, and their methodology is pretty nice. But if we go with the last CNN poll, and that's what this video is about. I know it took like 5 minutes for me to get to it, but if we go to what this video is about, it's about the New Hampshire poll that came out of CNN, and this poll is usually I like CNN polls. I think they're pretty good at what they do. And if we look at this poll, generally the way we're looking at it is a lot of unregistered people are participating in this poll. Among likely GOP voters, if you look at it, 47 of these people that participated in this poll are going to be in the primary, are going to be voting in the primary. If we look at New Hampshire's general electorate, it's about 32%, 38%, 30%. They love to talk about how New Hampshire is a very independent heavy state because, again, Democrats control 32, Republicans control 32, and then about 36 or so are undeclared. And these people are going to play a big role. And the reason that we see Nikki Haley doing so well compared to other states, like if we say, for example, check out South Carolina, which is Nikki Haley's home state, and it was the last ditch effort that DeSantis was making. You can see she's not doing so hot in this state. I think she's at 25% about, while Trump is at that, really high 60-ish%. If we look at another swing state, if we say look at Iowa, even that Iowa Iowa polling averages that generally showed Haley at 18%, DeSantis at around 16%, and Trump at 50%. There is a huge discrepancy if you look at it now between these states and then you look at New Hampshire. It's a very different terrain that you're looking at because it's not your traditional GOP voter base. It's actually very independent heavy, and these independent voters do really like Nikki Haley. They are generally more moderate. They are generally more, liberal in terms of the conservative voting base, and that's the same thing for a lot of registered Republicans in this state. It's not just that these are registered Republicans likely to vote in the primary. A lot of New Hampshire Republican voters are pretty moderate. You look at their governor even. Look at their governor, Chris Sununu. Chris Sununu is not necessarily a moderate, but if you look at it in terms of how much he spreads around ideological views or how much he participates in the culture war, Governor Chris Sununu is no Ron DeSantis or Kristi Noem. He is a very leveled and controlled and collected governor, and it makes sense. It makes sense because that's just the way these things happen to be in New Hampshire and generally along the East Coast. They are far more liberal and progressive. So what I'm trying to say is that Nikki Haley is really appealing to this voter base that really is important. Uniquely, though, it's only to New Hampshire where independents can vote in this election. You generally have to be registered with the party in order to vote in a primary in most states, but in New Hampshire, you can vote as an independent in an open primary. But if we're looking at the results that came out, among undeclared independent candidates, Nikki Haley is leading with 58%. That's pretty good, I would say. That's the good news that she's looking for. But if we look at the overall polling, Nikki Haley's at 39% to Donald Trump's 50%. Donald Trump leads with 50% of the vote. And I only point that out because this has been a growing gap. Both of them, this is the best that they've done in this poll, but it went from 7 points in the last poll where I think she was at 32 and he was at 39. Now it's her at 39, which is good growth, but Trump is at 50. It's 11 points that separates them now. And if I was on the Nikki Haley campaign, I'd be worrying a little because now Ron DeSantis, he's out. And that's 6%. Pretty insignificant amount, I would argue, but that 6% matters because that 6% now goes to Donald Trump. Maybe 3% goes here and 3% goes there. that is still 42% to 53% if we split it evenly, although I do not think that it's going to be split evenly. In any situation, Ron DeSantis dropping out is not as good as Nikki Haley might think it is. The reason Nikki Haley might think it's good is because now she can call herself, this alternative to Donald Trump. Now she can say that this is, in fact, a two-person race that she so declared at the Iowa caucuses last week. That wasn't true then, but now it is true. But the problem is, the moment it becomes a two-person race, it actually does just become a referendum on Donald Trump and anti-Trumpism. And that's a really tough referendum to get by in the Republican Party because there's just no support for a not Donald Trump. And that's the thing with this 6%. DeSantis also endorsed Trump right off the get-go. He endorsed Trump, and apparently he didn't even tell Trump's campaign. Trump became suddenly very polite. He retired the Ron DeSanctimonious nickname. He started saying very nice things. He said he's very honored to have Ron DeSantis' endorsement. So he's really just trying to cater to those 6% of voters in New Hampshire. And this is great news because that 6% in its entirety, should it have gone to Donald Trump, 56% is a pretty commanding margin, especially if Nikki Haley has put in everything. This is an Iowa scenario this is the Iowa scenario that Ron DeSantis had. Now Nikki Haley has put everything she has into New Hampshire, and the numbers are going to look much better than they did for DeSantis, but the issue is Nikki Haley's still putting a lot more in the state. Fundraising and money-wise, she has saved her money and she's been more frugal, and so she has more money to spend here. But the issue is, the moment it's very obvious that she doesn't have a path after this. It's very obvious that there isn't something forward for her. And so if you look at that, it does look a little difficult for her. So among registered and undeclared candidates, Nikki Haley needs to really hope that she can win more of these voters, if she can turn out more of these voters. And she needs to hope on the other side that enough of these people, the Republican voters who are supporting Trump, don't come out and back her. That's the thing that she needs to really hope for. But unfortunately for her, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen because Trump, again, it's Trump you're running against. And Trump is notoriously in politics great at turning out people. He knows how to get people to vote. And if he's on the ballot, you bet your bottom dollar that a Trump supporter is going to go through hell to get there to vote for him. It just matters when and where, and they will get there. So this is where it ends up being. And this is also a bit of a liability for Nikki Haley because Trump is using this against her. Liberal and progressive. 91% of liberals and progressives support Nikki Haley. Only 17% of conservatives support Nikki Haley. 21% of libertarians support Nikki Haley. 71% of moderates. Trump, 71% vote with Trump. And the criticism that Donald Trump is throwing out now is that Nikki Haley is not a conservative, that Nikki Haley is not going to be a part of the conservative movement when she becomes president. She's going to become a moderate candidate. And that's not true, actually. Nikki Haley is very conservative. If you look at her record, she was a Tea Party governor. She challenged the Obama administration a lot. But the way politics goes, the way the media covers things, yes, she now is seemingly one of the pushover Republicans that Donald Trump really loves to criticize, putting her with the likes of Mitt Romney or John McCain. That's the thing. Like, this is where she really is going to have to answer for, and she is doing a good job, I would say, of answering it, saying that we have a bigger tent, that we should be inviting more people. But I just don't know. It seems like it's going to be a bit of a struggle for her. She has to do well in this primary, because if she doesn't do well in this primary, then I would say that, yes, this officially then will become Donald Trump's nomination. I mean, after Ron DeSantis dropped out, a lot of Republicans started calling Donald Trump the presumptive nominee. Yeah, so they've already jumped the gun, and they've already started saying, Trump's going to be the nominee, Trump's going to win, Trump's going to win. They feel really confident about it, I'd say. They really do. But that's for that part. But in general, if we're looking at the way this poll is starting to, this poll is showing what this poll shows, and it's a lot of different numbers, but basically what this poll shows is, in terms of a second choice, 43% are going to go for Ron DeSantis. That 43% is out. A lot of those people are just going to stick with Trump. Like, there's just no one else for them to pick. And that's the other thing going into the Tuesday. Going into Tuesday, there's just no one left. There's no one left to pick between. It's either you support the Trump candidate or you support the anti-Trump candidate. That's it. Even though the anti-Trump candidate was the UN ambassador in the Trump administration, who had a really good record and relationship with him. But that's okay. That doesn't matter. But yes, as we go into the polls and as we're starting to look at these numbers, I get this feeling that it's going to be a biggish margin. And I think Nikki Haley is going to really take stock, because it's the same reason Kamala Harris dropped out when she ran for president. Kamala Harris did not want to, run for president on the California ballot and lose her home state, because that would have been embarrassing. Because if she would have lost her home state, she knew that she would drop out. She'd have to run and she didn't know that she'd be VP. So she'd have to run for re-election as a U.S. Senator in California. It would have been really difficult and embarrassing. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, in 2020, she dropped out after losing her home state of Massachusetts. It was an embarrassing blow. Marco Rubio dropped out after losing his home state of Florida. It was an embarrassing blow. Nikki Haley, I hope, just as a political observer, that she doesn't, make that blunder again, that she doesn't lose her home state, because it would be politically really embarrassing to lose her home state, especially after touting that she could do it, that she knows South Carolina. The truth is, it's been 7 years since she was governor of that state. Things have changed. It's been a while, and she's not really been in touch. And if we look at the South Carolina polls, I pulled it up earlier. It's a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of bit lopsided against her. 60.9% to Haley's 24.8%, and Ron DeSantis's 8.9%. We all know where that's headed. So this is a two-person race, but a two-person race, if the two-person race was between first place and then 80th place, it's just not something that's bright. And that's not me praising Donald Trump. It's not me taking a side. It's not me, trying to whatever. I'm just looking at the numbers. And if you look at the numbers, Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee, honestly. Unless Nikki Haley can somehow win New Hampshire, win the state, just outright take first place, and then draw on that momentum in the South Carolina, somehow effectively convince, 25% of South Carolinians that she is better than Trump, it's a difficult path ahead. And it's not her fault. This was the best time for her to run for president. This was the best time. She won't have a good time in the future. Now she'll have a good chance in the future, because now she's run for president, so she's in everyone's memory all of a sudden. But if she didn't run this time, she wouldn't have been able to run in 4 years. So, she had to do what she had to do. But that is what it's looking like. We'll be covering the New Hampshire primary. I blew my mind trying to do live streams for the Iowa caucuses, so I'm not terribly excited to do it, but I'm going to do it. So you can check out the ishaanashow.com for live updates over there to see what's going on. But that does do it for today's video. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and check out the ishaanashow.com. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and X at the Sean S Show, and follow us on Spotify to get updates get the new episodes. Check out different videos. We're going to keep posting. And of course, remember to subscribe and like and comment down below what you think of DeSantis dropping out and what you think of Nikki Haley still in the race. I want to hear what you have to think, because I love reading your comments. So continue to support us the way you have been. Thank you so much for joining us for today's video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.